September 1st, 1943. Rabaul Airfield, New Britain. Inside a steaming operations tent, Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai rested his pen above the latest intelligence report. His one remaining eye, scarred by an American bullet a year before, skimmed the pages. Then he laughed. A new American fighter, the report claimed, had arrived. Heavy as a bomber, it said, broad as a transport. They called it the Hellcat. According to intelligence, it weighed twice as much as the nimble Zero. Sakai shook his head. Another clumsy American design, he thought. Another victory waiting to happen. Beyond the flaps of the tent, the A6M Zeros shimmered under the tropical sun, sleek, white, and predatory. For 2 years, these machines had ruled the skies. British Hurricanes, American P-40s, Dutch Buffaloes, all had fallen before them. The Zero was the symbol of Japan's air supremacy, and to its pilots, invincible. What Sakai didn't know, what no one in that tent could imagine, was that within 30 days, this so-called failure would rewrite the balance of power. The Hellcat would arrive like a storm. It would destroy 5,223 Japanese aircraft, losing only 270 of its own. A 19-to-1 kill ratio that would annihilate Japan's once dominant air arm. It would turn the Pacific War upside down, exposing that the Zero's perfection had always rested on fragile math and dangerous assumptions. In the autumn of 1943, the Imperial Japanese Navy was still confident, not because of arrogance, but because of numbers. Since Pearl Harbor, their pilots had achieved victory ratios that bordered on myth. 29 planes lost while destroying 347 at Pearl. 7 against 103 in the Philippines. 2 against 30 over Darwin. The British and Dutch air forces wiped from the map in weeks. And at the heart of that triumph was the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, a miracle of engineering. When captured examples reached American engineers in 1942, the data seemed fake. A fighter that could outrange bombers, outturn biplanes, and outclimb anything in the sky. It was as if the laws of physics had been bent. Japanese ace Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, who would claim 87 kills, wrote in his diary, "Flying the Zero is like wearing wings. It obeys your thoughts." American planes, he mocked, flew like trucks, heavy, wasteful, slow. The Zero's power came from its obsession with weight. Engineers stripped away everything non-essential. No armor to protect the pilot, no self-sealing fuel tanks. Radios often removed to save a few pounds. It was a blade, honed for speed, but one nick, one spark, and it would burn. Then came the intelligence reports. Early in 1943, Japanese analysts obtained data on America's newest naval fighter, the F6F Hellcat, through neutral Sweden. The specifications seemed absurd, propaganda perhaps. A monster weighing 12,000 pounds, twice the Zero. A huge radial engine, thick armor plating, bulletproof glass, and fuel tanks holding 250 gallons. Every instinct said impossible. At Combined Fleet Headquarters, Captain Minoru Genda, the mind behind Pearl Harbor, reviewed the reports and laughed. "The Americans have learned nothing," he said. "They still believe more weight equals more power. The Zero will fly circles around this iron beast." On paper, he was right. The Zero's wing loading, 22 pounds per square foot, gave it a turning radius under 620 feet. The Hellcat's 36.5 pounds meant a radius near 900 feet. In a turning dogfight, the sacred art of Japanese tactics, the Hellcat would be dead before it fired a shot. But numbers can lie. September 30th, 1943, Marcus Island. Petty Officer Yoshio Fukui was flying escort for a reconnaissance mission when he spotted 6 dark shapes rising from the horizon. At first, he thought they were bombers, maybe B-25s. Then they turned, sunlight catching their blue wings. Not bombers. Fighters. Something new. He would later write in his after-action report, "First encounter with new F6F type fighter. Appearance: heavy, awkward, like a torpedo plane with guns." Fukui did what training demanded, used the Zero's superior agility to swing behind the enemy. He rolled into a tight diving turn, expecting the American to overshoot. But the Hellcat did something unthinkable. It went straight up. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine roared, hurling the aircraft skyward at 3,500 feet per minute. The Zero's Nakajima Sakai engine, with barely half the power, couldn't follow. Fukui's airspeed bled away as his plane clawed uselessly at the sky. At 15,000 feet, the Hellcat flipped over in a hammerhead turn, dropping behind him like a predator. Tracer fire tore through the air, 650 caliber machine guns unleashing a storm. Volume of fire was unimaginable, Fukui wrote later. 17 hits in 3 seconds. He barely escaped by spinning downward into cloud cover. It was the first time a Japanese pilot had faced the Hellcat and survived to describe it. In the months that followed, others would not be so lucky. The Hellcat's apparent bulk concealed perfection. Armor that saved pilots, firepower that shredded enemies, and endurance that let it chase the Zero wherever it fled. By early 1944, the same Japanese squadrons that once ruled the skies were being erased, one mission at a time. What Sakai dismissed as a lumbering American failure had become the instrument of Japan's destruction. A machine born not of grace, but of sheer industrial will. Proving that in war, beauty and agility were nothing against raw survival. The age of the Zero was over. The era of the Hellcat had begun. October 19th, 1943, Marcus Island. Petty Officer Yoshio Fukui limped his crippled Zero back to base, the fuselage riddled with holes, fuel bleeding into the wind. His wingman, Masao Shigeta, was gone. So was the reconnaissance plane they'd sworn to protect. The enemy's strange, heavy fighter had drawn first blood. The Hellcat had arrived. October 5th, 1943, Wake Island. Task Force 14 launched another raid, and from above, 12 Japanese Zeros of the 252nd Air Group raced to intercept. To them, it was another American nuisance attack. Hit-and-run raids had become routine. A burst of bombs, a flash of smoke, and the enemy retreating before Japanese interceptors could even climb. But that morning, something changed. Lieutenant Tetsuo Shiga led his formation up through the clouds, 20,000 feet over Wake. He wrote, "We held every advantage. Altitude, surprise, position. The battle should have been easy." Below them, 12 F6F Hellcats cruised in tight formation, dark blue shapes against the silver sea. As the Zeros dove, the Americans didn't scatter. They didn't try to turn or twist away. They stayed together, steady, disciplined, diving just enough to build speed. When the first Zero opened fire, its tracers bounced harmlessly off armor. The Hellcat could take punishment the Zero never could. 200 pounds of steel plating shielded the pilot. Self-sealing fuel tanks soaked up round after round. When the Japanese had emptied their guns, the Americans turned the sky into a trap. They climbed, straight up to where the Zero's engine gasped for air. At 25,000 feet, the Hellcat still had 1,600 horsepower, the Zero barely half that. Shiga wrote, "They came down on us like hawks on sparrows. They hit us, then vanished into the sun. We couldn't follow. 8 Zeros fell burning into the sea. The Hellcats lost none." The myth of the Zero's invincibility had begun to fracture. November 11, 1943, Rabaul. Inside a briefing tent, the pilots of the 204th Air Group gathered around Lieutenant Commander Taro Tanimizu, a veteran with 32 victories.
He'd fought the Hellcats and survived. Barely. "Forget everything you know about air combat," he told them. "The Americans have changed the rules." He described what Japan's airmen were slowly realizing. The Hellcat wasn't built to turn tighter. It was built to never need to. American pilots fought with mathematics, not honor duels. Their doctrine was energy fighting, altitude, speed, and teamwork, replacing the solo heroics of the old samurai. "They strike from above," Tanimizu said. "One covers, one kills. While you chase one, another dives on you." Even their radios, once mocked as useless weight, made them deadly. "We fly as individuals," he said bitterly. "They fight as one machine." The men listened in silence. The age of the lone warrior was ending. December 1943, Truck Lagoon. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the man who had once led the Pearl Harbor raid, now inspected crippled Zeros returning from combat. The damage told a story. Where the Zero's thin skin had shattered, the Hellcat's armor had endured. The gap was becoming insurmountable. On paper, it was pure math. A Hellcat 6 500 caliber Browning M2s spat 4,500 rounds per minute, each bullet carrying 3,500 foot-pounds of force. The Zero's twin 7.7mm guns delivered barely a fifth of that power. In every exchange, the Americans had more fire, more range, more endurance. And now there was something worse: radar. While Japanese pilots searched the sky with their eyes, the Hellcats were being guided from ships miles away. Controllers on carriers could see them, invisible dots moving on glowing screens, and vector them perfectly into position. They knew where the enemy was, how high, and which direction to attack. Lieutenant Sadamune Kumachi remembered his first encounter. "We were climbing through cloud when they appeared from above. We never saw them. They fell on us with perfect aim. They knew our position before we did. It was like fighting ghosts who could see in the dark." The Japanese could feel it now. They were being hunted by science. January 1944. The pilot crisis. The Imperial Navy once produced the best aviators on Earth. Their training took 3 years, 700 flight hours of mastery. Each graduate was a precision instrument of air combat. By 1944, that perfection was gone. Fuel was scarce. Time was gone. Pilots were being pushed into combat after 300 hours, sometimes less. Some Army flyers barely reached 200 hours. They learned to fly in gliders because gasoline was too precious. Their gunnery training, 50 bullets each. Instrument flying, formation drills, night missions, all abandoned. The Empire needed bodies, not veterans.
Meanwhile, American pilots arrived with 300 hours in modern aircraft, trained over endless Texas skies. They'd fired thousands of rounds in practice, learned to land on carriers blindfolded, mastered team tactics before ever seeing combat. At Kasumigura Naval Air Station, training officer Yoshihiro Hashimoto wrote in despair, "We are sending children to fight professionals." He recorded a tragedy. Yesterday, Ensign Yamamoto arrived at the front. He had never fired his guns in flight. We have no ammunition. He had never flown at night. We have no fuel. He died 7 minutes into his first battle. The empire was bleeding its youth into the sea. October 1944. The Formosa disaster. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudame, commander of Japan's Second Air Fleet, threw everything he had to stop the American raids on Formosa. 700 aircraft took to the skies, the last of Japan's trained pilots. For 3 days, radio broadcasts boasted of victory. 26 American ships sunk, 300 aircraft destroyed. But when the gun cameras were developed, the truth emerged. The Americans had lost 89 aircraft. Japan had lost 329 and almost every surviving ace. Lieutenant Sadaki Akamatsu called it the end of the air war. He wrote, "The Hellcats were waiting at every height. When we climbed, they were above. When we dove, they were below. They divided the sky like a map, every piece covered." He paused before adding, "It wasn't combat. It was extermination." June 19, 1944. The Battle of the Philippine Sea. The day would be remembered forever as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Japan had rebuilt its carrier force for one last decisive strike. 9 carriers, 456 aircraft, every remaining pilot they could muster. Against them, Task Force 58, 15 carriers, 956 aircraft, half of them Hellcats. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa believed pilot skill could still triumph. He was wrong. At 8:30 a.m., his first wave of 69 planes roared off their decks. American radar spotted them 150 miles out. By the time the Japanese reached the combat zone, Hellcats were already waiting. The sun behind them, altitude above them, formation perfect. Lieutenant Zenji Abe, leading the escort, looked up and froze. 60 of them, he wrote, stacked in the sky like a wall of steel. The fight lasted 12 minutes. Of 69 Japanese planes, 42 were destroyed. Commander David McCampbell, leader of Air Group 15, downed 7 himself. His wingman, Roy Rushing, shot 6. "The Zeros tried to turn with us," McCampbell said later. "We didn't bother. We hit once, climbed, and hit again. They stalled every time." By sunset, Japan had lost 346 carrier aircraft and another 50 from shore bases. American losses, 30. That night, in ready rooms filled with laughter and disbelief, U.S. pilots named it the Turkey Shoot, because the enemy had been as helpless as birds in an open field. October 24, 1944. The Battle of Leyte Gulf. The largest naval battle in human history. Among the chaos, Commander David McCampbell once again took off from the USS Essex with just 6 wingmen. Ahead, 60 Japanese aircraft. For 90 minutes, the sky became fire. McCampbell shot down 9 enemy planes, 5 Zeros, 4 bombers.
Rushing destroyed 6 more.
I ran out of ammunition, McCampbell wrote afterward. Not a single hit on my aircraft. The Hellcat never faltered. 7 American fighters had faced 60 Japanese and destroyed 15 without loss. It was no longer a contest of skill or courage. The air war had become arithmetic. The machine outlasted the myth. The Hellcat, once mocked as heavy and crude, had become the instrument of a nation's dominance and the tomb of another's dreams. October 1944, the Pacific skies burned with fire and steel. Commander David McCampbell, already a legend among naval aviators, would etch his name into eternity. 7 kills on June 19th, 9 more on October 24th. 2 single days that turned him into a symbol of human precision and machine perfection. For his valor, he was awarded the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross, not for luck, but for mastery. But behind his triumph lay a shadow, a collapse no nation could hide. In the weeks after the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf, surviving Japanese pilots began showing what their own doctors would later call Hellcat syndrome. It was more than fear. It was hopelessness made flesh. Admiral Ozawa, the architect of Japan's carrier fleet, put it plainly in his report. The enemy has turned air combat into an industry. Each Hellcat is not a fighter, but a part of a system. The skies had become a factory floor, one side forged by machines, the other still flying on spirit. By early 1945, that imbalance became unbearable. Training collapsed. Naval pilots who once spent years in the sky now received barely 50 hours of flight time. Army pilots, 60 at most, and the kamikaze recruits, barely a week. 7 days to learn the sky and to die in it. Then came Okinawa, April to June 1945, Operation Iceberg, the largest air-sea battle in history. Japan hurled 1,900 kamikaze sorties at the American fleet in a final storm of desperation. The F6F Hellcat became more than a hunter, it became a shield. Commander Eugene Valencia and his Flying Circus Division pioneered new tactics of survival. He called it the mowing machine. 4 Hellcats flying abreast, 100 yards apart, sweeping through incoming waves like a scythe of flame. Each pilot covered a sector. Each pass was merciless efficiency. Climb, dive, strike, repeat. The numbers told the story. Hellcats flew 38,000 combat missions in the Okinawa campaign alone. They destroyed 2,351 enemy aircraft for 249 losses, a 9.5-to-1 kill ratio. More importantly, 4 out of 5 kamikaze planes never reached their targets. The sky became a graveyard of failed sacrifices. By 1945, technology had created a chasm too wide for courage to cross. The F6F Hellcat had evolved again, water injection boosting its 2,200 horsepower engine, new rocket mounts, improved armor, and the revolutionary K-14 computing gun sight. For pilots like Saburo Sakai, Japan's living legend, this new era was merciless. He first faced the Hellcat in June 1944. Even after 200 air combats, even with every trick learned in the flames of war, he was nearly killed in minutes. In his memoir he wrote, "I tried every maneuver I knew. Loops, rolls, spirals. The Hellcat followed like my shadow. I lived only because the American forgot to drop his fuel tank." The numbers that followed were mathematical annihilation. By war's end, the F6F Hellcat had destroyed 5,223 enemy aircraft in the air. Only 270 were lost to enemy fighters, a kill ratio of 19-to-1. It produced 305 U.S. Navy aces and accounted for 3/4 of all American naval aerial victories. It wasn't just a machine, it was the arithmetic of dominance. For Japan, the cost was measured in lives that could not be replaced. Of 18,000 naval aviators who had begun the war, Fewer than 100 combat-experienced pilots were alive by August 1945. The transformation of the Japanese air arm into kamikaze units marked the final admission of defeat. Vice Admiral Tachijiro Onishi, the father of the kamikaze, justified it with cold mathematics. A Zero attacking a carrier conventionally has no chance. The Hellcats will destroy it. If that same Zero becomes a bomb, there is a 30% chance of success. Either way, the pilot dies. As a kamikaze, his death has meaning. On October 25, 1944, Japan's greatest ace, Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, escorted the first kamikaze mission led by Lieutenant Yukio Seki. He scored his 86th and 87th kills that day, 2 Hellcats. The next day, flying as a passenger in a transport, he was shot down by Hellcats from VF-14. The hunter became the hunted. The master fell to the very machine he had once mocked. Then came silence. August 15, 1945. The voice of the emperor echoed across a shattered empire. At Atsugi Airfield, Captain Minoru Genda, who had once dismissed the Hellcat as a clumsy design, listened to the surrender broadcast surrounded by teenagers with 40 hours of training, sitting beside planes built from spare parts and prayer. That same day, above the Pacific, Ensign Clarence Moore of VF-31 on board the USS Belleau Wood shot down a Yokosuka D-4Y Judy at 2 p.m. It was the final aerial victory of World War II. The Japanese pilot, unaware of surrender, flew toward the American fleet. 2 short bursts from the Hellcat's 6 guns ended the last battle of the Pacific Air War. A month later, the occupiers arrived. September 1945, 12 F6F Hellcats from USS Yorktown landed at Atsugi. Japanese pilots and mechanics, the same men who once called the plane a failure, now lined the runway in silence. Lieutenant Robert Vaughn, an American ace with 19 kills, demonstrated loops, rolls, and climbs for them. When he landed, the stunned Japanese engineers approached him. "You have to understand," he said through an interpreter, "that wasn't full power. In combat with water injection, it's 20% faster. You can't break it. We've tried." Then came the engineers' reckoning. Inside the hangars of Atsugi, Japanese technicians dismantled captured Hellcats piece by piece. They found a masterpiece of standardization, the Pratt & Whitney R2-800 engine, built from 2,840 precision-machined parts, every one interchangeable with any other engine on Earth. Their own Nakajima Sake engines had to be hand-fitted, no 2 exactly alike. When Professor Jiro Horikoshi, the brilliant mind who had designed the Zero, examined the Hellcat, he said nothing for a long time. Then he finally whispered the truth Japan had avoided since 1943. This is not merely a plane. It is an idea, one that we never learned to build.